Come back to a wicked historian.
He wore the crown, yet his real power didn't come from armies or law. It came from fear, secrecy, and the ability to bend reality itself. Tonight, we uncover the dark mind of a ruler history barely mentions, because what he did, even then, was too dangerous to record fully. Most emperors are remembered for their grand victories, their sweeping reforms, or the golden ages they ushered in. But for this ruler, memory was something he controlled carefully, methodically, and often cruelly. The official records, the scrolls and stone tablets that survived the centuries, they depict a disciplined, strategic leader. There's abundant praise for the order and stability he brought, for his clever administration and his sharp legal mind. Yet, beneath this polished surface, there's an entirely different story, one of obsession, paranoia, and a chillingly calculated cruelty. His rise to power was swift, almost unervingly so. He wasn't the kind of man content to simply inherit power. He engineered it. Potential rivals for the throne would vanish without a trace. Powerful alliances were tested to their breaking point, and whispers in the palace corridors were never left unanswered. In fact, many were silenced before they could even fully form. What's truly frightening is how normal it all appeared on paper. You could read the official chronicles for days and never suspect the underlying terror. Routine decrees about trade routes, standard punishments for common criminals, everyday political maneuvering. But those who lived through it, the few who survived his court and dared to speak of it later, they describe a completely different reality. They speak of an emperor who could charm and intimidate you in the same sentence, a leader whose favor felt like a divine blessing until it became a suffocating burden, impossible to maintain. He studied human behavior like a scientist dissecting a specimen. Every reaction, every hesitation, every declaration of loyalty was noted and tested. And once he understood your limits, he pushed them, carefully. This wasn't mindless cruelty for its own sake. It was a cold, precise calculation. Every action had a purpose. Every fear he instilled was a tool. And that's what made him so terrifyingly effective. The entire system of power, the very government itself, became an extension of his own psychology. His paranoia became state policy, his insecurities dictated foreign relations. But history rarely labels its rulers as psychopaths. Instead, it sanitizes their legacies. Victories are celebrated in grand monuments. Reforms are praised as visionary, and the terror, the psychological torment, he inflicted on his own people. It's either ignored completely or buried in obscure footnotes, dismissed as rumors or the bitter lies of his enemies. Even his own closest advisors, men who stood by his side for decades, often couldn't tell whether he was genuinely testing their loyalty or meticulously plotting their downfall. That constant, knowing uncertainty is precisely what allowed him to maintain out control for so long. Because what he did next wasn't just an act of cruelty, it was a strategy that would reshape the empire forever. Today, we read diving deep into an incident that reveals the terrifying genius of one emperor's mind, a test of loyalty so bizarre and calculated. It redefines what we mean by absolute power. It all started with a minor court official. This wasn't some high-ranking general or a plotting noble, just an ordinary bureaucrat, accused of some small, forgettable mistakes. But in the emperor's hands, this man became the unsuspecting star of an elaborate psychological trial. The official story, the one you'd read in the state-sponsored histories, claims it was all a lesson in obedience. A simple, if firm, reminder that rules must be followed, but hidden away. In private letters and secret memos, a different story emerges. This wasn't a lesson, it was a demonstration. A cold, hard display of absolute control. Surviving accounts, pieced together from whispered testimonies, describe it as something else entirely, a carefully designed ordeal where fear, confusion, and manipulation were the emperor's primary weapons. The official narrative says he rewarded the cautious and punished the reckless. But the reality was far more sinister. The emperor wasn't just passing judgment. He was studying human reactions like a scientist with a lab full of specimens. He watched closely, noting who could resist the rising tide of panic, who would betray their colleagues to save themselves, and who would simply adapt, bending to the new, terrifying reality he had created. No one who went through this ordeal came out unchanged. His methods were a master class in subtlety. There were no grand pronouncements, no public accusations. Instead, orders were delivered in hushed tones. In private chambers, messages were carefully worded to manipulate perception, turning friends into suspected traitors and simple requests into veiled threats. Allies weren't treated as friends. They were used as instruments, pieces on a chessboard that only the emperor could see. Each move was designed to test the absolute limits of trust and loyalty. What makes this incident so remarkable, so chilling, is its brutal efficiency. The emperor didn't need to shout or draw his sword. The fear was built into the very structure of the court. The environment itself became a trap. People didn't even realize they were being manipulated until long after they had been molded and shaped by the experience. To the outside world, it looked like routine governance. A few personnel changes, some new protocols, nothing out of the ordinary. And that duality, the serene surface of order masking the turbulent chaos beneath, is what made him a true master of psychological rule. The effects of this one incident rippled through generations. Those who witnessed it, those who survived it, carried the memory silently. They passed on a culture of obedience and extreme caution without ever needing to speak of the event itself. Fear became tradition, silence became policy. And that's the lesson that historians often miss when they focus only on battles and decrees. The emperor's ultimate power didn't rest in his armies or his edicts. It rested in the minds of those who served him. And once he had control of their thoughts, he had complete control of the empire. In our next video, we'll explore how this psychopathic approach to leadership fundamentally changed the empire itself. We'll look at the subtle, lasting shifts in governance, culture, and collective memory that continue to fascinate and disturb historians to this day. Because by the time his shadow left the throne, the empire itself had learned to fear its ruler. Even after he was gone, the emperor was gone, but his ghost haunted the empire. His death didn't erase the psychological chains he had forged. The policies he created to protect himself, born from paranoia, hardened into sacred traditions. Fear, once a tool, was now woven into the very fabric of the court's protocol. Obedience wasn't just expected, it was an unconscious reflex. History books, as they often do, painted a grand picture. They celebrated his military victories, his sweeping reforms, and the stability he brought. But they rarely dared to look into the shadows to explore the crushing human cost of his reign. The culture of compliance he engineered, the invisible scars carried by everyone who survived his court. These stories were conveniently left out. A modern observer, looking back, might see an efficient bureaucracy, a disciplined state. They might praise the order. Those who lived closer to the events saw something else, a cold, ruthless strategy. And for those of us who study the human mind, we see something far darker. We see a ruler whose genius was inseparable from his cruelty, two sides of the same tarnished coin. What's truly chilling is how ordinary it all seemed on the surface. The psychological manipulation wasn't broadcasted with trumpets and fanfare. It was hidden in plain sight, concealed within everyday procedures, formal ceremonies, and dry administrative documents. This wasn't chaos or a public spectacle of terror. It was order-controlled, methodical, and frighteningly precise. The emperor's story teaches us a vital lesson about the nature of power. It isn't always a roar. Sometimes, it's a whisper. Sometimes, it's quiet, calculated, and invisible. And that is what makes it the most dangerous. History has a short memory for victims. It prefers to celebrate conquerors and reformers, but the patterns they leave behind, the psychological architecture of their power, remain for us to study. By examining them, we can understand how one single mind shaped the fate of millions. We can see how human behavior can be guided, tested, and ultimately controlled, all under the respectable disguise of governance. Even centuries later, the emperor's influence serves as a profound case study in power, fear, and psychology. It's a stark reminder that leadership isn't always heroic. Sometimes, it is profoundly, methodically dark. The Dark Emperor may have left the throne, but his shadow remains. And for those who study history closely, his mind is still a warning about how far strategy, intellect, and fear can go when combined. If you found this exploration of power fascinating, subscribe to A Wicked Historian and hit the bell icon for more videos like this. Comment below and let me know what other dark chapters of history you want me to uncover. Thanks for watching.